Coming up on Messenger, Jonathan Zita shares how literature evangelism is making a difference across Canada and why young people are such a vital part of the mission. Then, we sit down with Joseph Richards to learn how students in public schools and universities can stand firm in their beliefs and still succeed in the classroom. It's a practical, faith-building episode you don't want to miss. Stay tuned. Messenger starts now. In the book of Daniel, there's a powerful moment when three young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are told to bow down to a golden image or face death in a fiery furnace. Everyone else gave in, but they stood firm. They didn't panic. They didn't compromise. They simply said, "Our God is able to deliver us, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow." Their courage wasn't loud, but it was unshakable, and God honored that kind of faith. That story still speaks to us today, especially when we're faced with pressure to hide or compromise what we believe. In this episode, we're talking about standing firm and being a light in the world. Up first, we hear from Jonathan Zita, a literature evangelist who's passionate about spreading truth and hope through books. Let's check it out.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Zita. I'm with Lifestyle Canada, Canada's literature evangelism ministry. Everything we do centers around literature. Why? Because we believe that God's word has power to change lives. We've been going through in the last episodes the I Forget method. I Forget method basically centers around leaving literature in strategic location, intentionally leaving it so that seekers can have a connection with Jesus through the word that we share. So one of the ways that you can practice the I Forget method is through leaving literature in staff rooms. So many of us, we work in places that are public places, that have staff rooms, that maybe where they do photocopying or where people can grab a coffee or eat their lunch. And so by leaving literature there for someone to pick up, it gives an opportunity for individuals that are curious to pick it up. You know, the worst thing that can happen is simply that it's thrown away. But if literature is small, inexpensive, it's okay, because for every 10 maybe that is thrown away, one will have an impact in somebody's lives. So in Montreal, we got a story where an individual called Teresa is working at this specific place, and she found a glow tract left by a church member. She doesn't know, even up to this day, who left the glow tract. But as she read through the glow tract, she was so encouraged by what she read. Teresa was previously not a Christian. She was actually involved in spiritualism and the occult. But something was telling her that this was not correct. This was not right. She didn't have peace. And so just before she found the tract, she was starting to read the Bible. She had gotten a Bible, started to read the Bible, and slowly as she's reading, she's discovering that there is freedom in truth, and she's getting to know Jesus and this beautiful being, and she's feeling the pull to come back to occult, but yet she knows it's not right, and so she's struggling, and she doesn't know which one is right or what she should do, and she lands on this tract that is left in the staff room. And as she reads, it speaks to her. It brings peace to her soul. And so she calls her office, and I answer the call, and she explains to me all of this, how, you know, she's been struggling, but she wants to get to know Jesus. She wants to be able to have a better life. She wants to understand the Bible. She believes that is where true light is found. And so she called with the number in the back of the tract, and I was able to contact or linked her with a local pastor who started studying the Bible not only with her, but also with her boyfriend. And now she's preparing for baptism. So it's just so amazing to be able to see how this tract that was left in a staff room by a nameless individual had an impact on someone that was seeking and is leading that individuals to take a stand for Jesus Christ. Not only her, but also her boyfriend. So staff room, wonderful place to be able to leave a piece of literature. Another place is public bathroom, a public bathroom. So there's a quite an interesting story of Bob and Frank. And Bob is a Seventh-day Adventist, Frank is not. And so Frank was actually visiting Bob, and they went to Tim Hortons to eat some food, to eat breakfast. And Bob went to the bathroom and left a small assortment of glow tracks there, and then came back to his seat to be able to eat the breakfast. And so Frank, a little later, decided he wanted to use the bathroom, so Frank went to the bathroom. And so Bob is waiting for his friend Frank. It's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and he's thinking, what's happening? Where is this guy? So finally Frank comes out of the bathroom with the glow tracks in his hand, and he looks at Bob and he says, Bob, I've just finished reading these. These are amazing. You should actually read them. Of course, Bob didn't say anything. You know, what's interesting is that Bob was trying to reach Frank for the longest while, and Frank was closed to hearing about Jesus and the truth about whatever the Seventh-day Adventist message. But what Bob could not do, 3 or 4 little tracks in a bathroom was able to do in accomplishing, reaching the heart of Frank. So what we have found is that by leaving literature in public places, in strategic places like public bathrooms, it gives an opportunities for those that are seeking to be able to connect with God in a special way. So why not share God's word with others? Why? Because God's word still has power to change lives.
That was Jonathan Zita sharing how literature evangelism helps people stand strong in their faith every day. Next, we'll hear from attorney Joseph Richards. He's passionate about helping students understand their rights when it comes to practicing their faith in school. Joseph will share practical advice and inspiring stories that show how staying true to your beliefs can make a real difference. We are happy to have you, Joseph.
Pleasure to be here, Adriana.
So what is reasonable accommodation, and why is it important for students of faith attending public schools or universities?
So reasonable accommodation is a big term, but I can break it down into a couple of elements.
Okay.
Really what you're talking about is a change, creating a change or modification or adjustment by a service provider like a school or workplace in order to allow an individual to be able to fully participate in the environment. So when we're talking about a university, for instance, the school has to, or the university has to provide reasonable accommodation to allow the individual to be able to fully participate. So you can think about a situation of a person with a disability. Allowing them to be able to fully participate would be considered a reasonable accommodation. And for a person who is practicing a particular faith, for instance, Seventh-day Adventist, and they want to have a Sabbath accommodation,
yes,
then it would be for the institution to provide for reasonable accommodations so the person is able to fully participate in the environment without compromising their faith.
Right.
You will see oftentimes conflicts between a tradition or a practice or a policy or a requirement and a person's individual faith. So it's important to understand reasonable accommodation, because it's quite likely if you're in a secular university, secular academic setting, you're going to have to ask for accommodation at some point.
Yes, that's true. So can you briefly explain what rights students have when it comes to practicing their religion in a public academic setting?
So students' rights are quite broad. They have the right to express their religious beliefs. Sometimes we don't necessarily think that they do have that right, but you do. You're protected. It's called freedom of expression. It's guaranteed by our Charter of Rights and Freedoms in this country. It's guaranteed by provincial human rights legislation. You have the right to express your religious beliefs as long as you're not infringing on the rights of another person. And so you have the right to ask for accommodation when it comes to if there's a exam that's scheduled on Sabbath, on Saturday, then you can ask for that to be changed. You can also ask for an exemption from a course requirement that conflicts with your religious beliefs as well. So there's different elements and different types of accommodation that can occur. It can also be as simple as having the right to congregate with other like-minded students, other Christians maybe. And you have the right to, have a campus club, for instance, that is Christians or Adventists. You can do that. That's nice. You can do that without fear of any type of penalty or consequence, because there is the duty for the institution not to discriminate against you because of your religious belief.
Okay, so many young people feel nervous about speaking up. What encouragement would you give to a student who's unsure about asking for accommodation?
Being nervous is completely normal. That's what I would tell them to begin with. Because, I get nervous, even though I've been a lawyer for 15 years, I still get nervous. If I have to go to court, it's a nerve-wracking situation. So, number one, understand that it's completely normal to be nervous. I would encourage the young person to pray, because I believe that prayer can really allow you to refocus, reframe the situation, and God will lead you to know exactly what to say and when to say it and how to say it, when to speak and when not to speak. So I really encourage prayer to really center yourself and be able to understand and know exactly how to respond to the situation. So those are a couple of tips, as well as if you're really nervous and you have trouble with your words, maybe write it out before you approach a professor, for instance, so that you can practice and you know exactly the points that you want to raise. Or it can simply be writing it out and write it to and send an email to the professor. So communicate in writing is another tip that I would provide as well. That would help you if you're very nervous.
That's very helpful. So what are some practical first steps a student should take if their exam or class schedule conflicts with their religious beliefs?
So, like I said before, prayer, I think, is the perfect first step. The second as well is to make sure that you address it promptly. You don't want to delay, you don't want to wait, you want to actually raise it at the first opportunity that you know about the conflict or you see that the conflict has arisen.
Right.
And be persistent. Sometimes you may not get a clear answer at the beginning. Make sure you do your follow-ups with your professor, or maybe it's a supervisor, or academic supervisor. Make sure you follow up until you get that clear answer. And if you don't, keep going up the levels, the different levels of the academic institution, because you do usually have a right to appeal a decision. So just because a professor may say one thing doesn't mean that that's the final answer. You can go up to different levels and get a satisfactory outcome. So those are some practical first steps. I would also recommend that if you do have a verbal conversation with your professor or with anyone, follow that up with a email confirming what you had talked about orally. So for instance, if the professor says, oh yeah, no problem, we will work on a different date for your exam, then you can follow up the next day and say, well, thank you, Professor, for accommodating that, and I'm glad that we're going to be able to work out a different date. So then you have a written confirmation. You've created a record yourself of a written confirmation of the conversation that just happened, so that if the professor changes their mind, or if there's a change somehow, you can really go back to that email.
That's good. So it sounds like students should not give up. Like they need to have determination to just go forward.
Absolutely. Determination is key, and that will be a strong tool for you as you are asking for accommodation, determination is key, because there's different people. Some will be more accommodating, some may not be. But if you're determined, you're consistent, you're going to be able to get a good outcome, most likely at the end of the day.
That's great. So why is building a good relationship with teachers and professors helpful when it comes to asking for religious accommodation?
Great question. Because there's a key word that everyone needs to really think about and focus on, and that is called credibility. Right? So when you have fostered a good relationship, if you've shown yourself to be a good student, a hardworking student, then you've developed credibility in the eyes of that professor. So then when you are asking for an accommodation, they'll be like, well, of course, you're not trying to game the system or trying to gain some type of advantage. This is likely a genuine request coming from from what I have observed, a genuine student.
Right.
So that's where building those relationships is so important. I have seen that personally in my experience, where it can even allow for informal ways to resolve the conflict. So for instance, I can recall one specific example where a professor simply said, come to my office on Wednesday, and you can take the exam, and I will observe the exam. And so he just did that on a one-off for me, and didn't go through the formal. I think he should have perhaps gone through a formal system to actually process the accommodation request, but he didn't. He did it off the cuff, informally.
And it worked out.
And it worked out. And so those types of solutions are possible. And in my experience as a college professor, I've done that for students. I've done that for students with disabilities, where I have simply made those types of off-the-cuff arrangements, informal arrangements, and they can happen when the student is a credible student.
Well, that's good to know. So how can pastors and church leaders support students who are going through this process?
Well, that's a good question too. What pastors can do is to provide sound counsel to students, understanding that this is a very important time in the life of the student, and the struggle is real and the tension is real. So there needs to be an empathy there. There needs to be that very proactive to reach out to the student to make sure that they're okay. Practically, they can also support the student by writing accommodation letters. And we have some templates on our website at Adventist,
that's great.
at Adventist.ca. So you can go there and see some templates of letters. And if you provide personalized templates with personal examples of how that person is in fact practicing their faith, that will help the student as well, because the more personal the letter is, the more credible it will be.
Right.
And making sure that you are writing that and giving it to the student as soon as possible, because understanding that timelines are very important. So making sure that you don't just brush it off or you wait, several weeks. You try to get that letter to the student as quickly as possible so that they can submit it. That's also a way that you can show that you're really allied with the student's request and you're there to help them as much as possible.
So sooner is better than later.
Sooner is better than later, absolutely.
What does the law mean when it talks about undue hardship, and how can students respond if that term is used to deny their request?
So undue hardship, again, can be very complicated, but let's try to boil that down a little. Okay. So undue hardship basically means that your right to reasonable accommodation, there is a limit. And the limit is undue hardship. So that means that the institution, we're talking about universities or colleges here, they have to endure some hardship as long as it's not undue. The adjective is so important, undue hardship. So the courts require that the institution bear some form of hardship as long as it's not undue. And the test is very high. I won't go into all the legal details about that, but the test is very high. In other words, it's very hard for an institution to prove undue hardship. So normally what will happen, or practically, the way that just the institution may cite undue hardship, may say that accommodating may be unduly hard for them to actually accommodate a student's requests. But again, that's not the final say.
Oh.
And just because they say that doesn't mean that they can prove it. And in law, it's all about what you prove, not what you say. So don't rely necessarily on what a professor says or what a supervisor says. Think about actually what are they actually saying and are there alternatives? And I always encourage, even though students don't have to propose alternatives, it's actually the responsibility of the institution to actually provide the accommodation and to think of different ways that they can accommodate the student.
That's
but
good.
I encourage students to think proactively. Try to think about an alternative that could help the situation. Maybe it is one of those informal arrangements that I talked about earlier. Show a willingness to be able to take the exam earlier rather than after all of your other classmates, to show that you're not trying to gain any type of advantage over your classmates. That shows that you're willing, you're thinking about different options, and that shows that accommodating me would not be unduly hard. And that's the thing that you want to be showing. So it's so important to, if you get a negative response from your professor or from even the professor supervisor, keep going up the different rungs, because if you go up those rungs, eventually, hopefully, there will be a different response at the end of the day. And if all else fails, you can, in fact, contact legal counsel. You can contact the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada. And I can get involved and I can start communicating with the university as well to remind them of their obligations under the law, because these are legal rights.
Well, that's good to know that students can ask for help if they find that they're running into too many challenges that maybe they might need someone to assist them with and provide legal counsel. So that's great. Have you seen any success stories where students stood up for their faith and were able to get the accommodation they needed?
I have seen multiple examples of that happening, and I can recall one situation where somebody was not getting a clear response from their institution, and that's a tactic that is used. Sometimes to delay is to deny. Right? So if you're not answering the student or not responding, and then the pressure is on the student, and then oftentimes students will simply say, okay, well, I won't cause more trouble.
They might give up.
And they will, they'll just give up. And so I can attest to a situation where a student did contact us at the SDACC, and then we wrote several letters to different levels of the administration of that university. And finally, they responded. They didn't actually clearly acknowledge their duty to provide reasonable accommodation. They simply responded by giving alternative exam dates.
Well, that's
good. So that's what the request was, and they came and ultimately accommodated the student. So we're quite happy about that.
Yes.
Really at the last minute, days to go before the exam. So there's always opportunities in order to try to convince or try to persuade the administration of an academic institution to take a different approach. And oftentimes by contacting our office, we can add a different level of seriousness to it.
Right.
Given the fact that the SDCC is the national headquarters for the Seventh-day Adventist Church here in Canada.
Well, that's a great success story.
Yeah.
And how is the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada helping to protect and defend religious liberty for students today?
Well, we do that in a lot of ways. Now, I started by talking about the fact that we have some of the most generous protections for persons seeking accommodation in the world.
That's excellent.
In the world. If you look at other countries, in Canada we do. And that's because of the work of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada. People who, long before me, who went up all the way to the Supreme Court in order to fight. And so some of the key cases dealing with religious accommodation because of Seventh-day Adventists. And it's right there in the case talking about Seventh-day Adventism and their beliefs, etc. So it's right there. It's really enshrined
That's
in some of the
wonderful.
highest decisions. So we do that advocacy, perhaps a little less so nowadays because we've done so much in the past. So it's there, it's part of the record, and so people acknowledge who we are as Seventh-day Adventists. So that's part of what we do is advocacy. We monitor cases that are going on here in Canada as well as in other countries in the world to see what's going on in different jurisdictions. We also do some counseling with students, for instance. If a student has a question or doesn't know exactly how to navigate a situation, I will talk with them and give them some pointers and tips about what they can do. And then we also have resources available on our website. So if you go to adventist.ca, you'll see some templates that talk about some of the subjects that we've talked about here today, about reasonable accommodation, about undue hardship. It will talk about the theory of it, but also you'll see some templates that you can, in fact, download and give to your pastor or even write yourself. You'll see different templates for you to know how you can advocate for yourself, because I really strongly believe in empowering students to really advocate for themselves, because their testimony is the best testimony. Right.
Yes, that's wonderful. And it's incredible the work that the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada is doing on behalf of students and others. Thank you so much, Joseph, for sharing your insights and encouragement. It's inspiring to hear how standing firm in faith and knowing your rights can empower students to overcome challenges. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and shed light on this important topic.
No problem. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us on Messenger today. We hope Jonathan's insights and Joseph's information encourages you to stand strong in your faith, no matter what challenges come your way. Remember, God calls us to be courageous and trust Him every step of the journey. If you would like to work with us, consider becoming an agent of hope and supporting this ministry. Your participation helps us continue spreading God's love and message of hope. To donate, visit agentsofhope.ca, where you can give by debit, credit, Apple Pay, or Google Pay. E-transfers are also accepted at agentsofhope@hopetv.ca. You can mail a check payable to Hope Channel Canada to the following address: Hope Channel Canada, 1148 King Street East, Oshawa, Ontario, L1H1H8. Or give us a call at 1-855-4HOPE-TV. That's 1-855-446-7388. Thank you for being with us today. Keep spreading hope and being a messenger in your community.